The warning lights on the bridge of the New Seoul flashed red 3 times before Captain Lee Tae-ho even noticed them. He was standing near the main viewing screen, watching the stars drift past in the quiet darkness of space. His ship was on. Routine patrol near the edge of human territory, far from Earth and the busy trade routes that connected the colonies. "Captain," called Lieutenant Park Min-soo from the communication station. His voice carried a note of worry that made Tae-ho turn around immediately. "We have an urgent transmission coming in. It's from the Galactic Tribunal." Tae-ho felt his stomach drop. The Galactic Tribunal was the highest court in known space, made up of the 5 oldest alien races. They settled disputes between different species and enforced the laws that kept peace across the galaxy. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 15 years, and the tribunal had never contacted them directly before. "Put it through," Tae-ho ordered, walking back to his captain's chair. The main screen flickered and changed from the starfield to show a tall, pale alien with 4 arms and silver eyes. Tae-ho recognized the species as Althari, known throughout the galaxy for their cold logic and precise speech. "Captain Lee Tae-ho of the human vessel New Seoul," the alien spoke in perfect but emotionless English. "I am Magistrate Kelthara of the Galactic Tribunal. You are hereby summoned to appear at Nexus Prime within 5 standard days." Tae-ho stood up slowly. "May I ask what this is about, Magistrate?" "Your maternal parent, Dr. Kim So-ra, has been arrested and charged with crimes against galactic law, specifically unauthorized genetic manipulation of a sentient species, violation of the Universal Biological Preservation Act, and crimes against galactic harmony." The words hit Tae-ho like physical blows. His mother was a xenobiologist who worked on the frontier colony of New Busan, studying alien life forms to help human settlers adapt to new worlds. She was gentle and kind, dedicated to helping all forms of life. The idea that she could be charged with such serious crimes seemed impossible. "There must be some mistake," Tae-ho said, trying to keep his voice steady. "My mother would never harm any living being." "The evidence has been reviewed by the preliminary court," Kelthara replied without any change in expression. "Dr. Kim So-ra was found conducting illegal experiments on members of the Valari species. Multiple subjects were found in her laboratory in various states of genetic alteration." Tae-ho felt the blood drain from his face. The Valari were a peaceful species that looked somewhat like tall, thin humans with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. They were known for their artistic abilities and their strong family bonds. If his mother had really been experimenting on them, it would be one of the most serious crimes possible under galactic law. "The punishment for these crimes," Kelthara continued, "is complete memory erasure followed by permanent exile to a dead world. However, as Dr. Kim So-ra is a human citizen, she has the right to legal representation before the tribunal. I want to represent her," Tae-ho said immediately. For the first time, the Althari showed something that might have been surprise. "Captain, no human has ever appeared before the Galactic Tribunal as legal counsel. The laws are complex and based on traditions that are thousands of years old. Most species require decades of study before their advocates can represent clients effectively." "I don't care," Tae-ho replied firmly. "She's my mother. I won't let her face this alone." Kelthara was quiet for a moment, as if consulting with others who were not visible on the screen. "Very well. You have 5 standard days to reach Nexus Prime. The trial will begin immediately upon your arrival. Be warned, Captain, that failure to appear will result in automatic conviction." The screen went dark, leaving Tae-ho standing in the sudden quiet of his bridge. Around him, his crew members stared in shock. Min-soo was the first to break the silence. "Captain, this has to be some kind of setup. Your mother wouldn't hurt anyone." Tae-ho nodded, but his mind was already racing. "Min-soo, set course for Nexus Prime, maximum speed, and get me everything we have on galactic law, the Valari species, and the tribunal procedures." Yes, sir, Min-Su replied, his fingers already flying over his control panel. As the new soul turned toward the galactic core and engaged its faster-than-light drive, Tae-Ho walked to his private quarters. Once the door closed behind him, he allowed himself a moment of weakness, sinking into his chair and putting his head in his hands. His mother had raised him alone after his father died in a mining accident on Mars. She had worked 3 jobs to put him through the Space Academy, never once complaining about the sacrifice. When he graduated and received his first assignment, she had been so proud that she cried during the ceremony. Sora had always been fascinated by alien life. Even as a child, Tai-Ho remembered her excitement when the first peaceful contact was made with the Centauri Alliance. She had immediately changed her career focus from human medicine to xenobiology, determined to help bridge the gap between species. When the frontier colonies opened up, she had volunteered to work on New Busan, one of the most remote human settlements. She said she wanted to be where she could do the most good, helping both human colonists and any alien species they encountered. Tae-Ho pulled up his personal communicator and tried to contact her, but the call couldn't go through. According to the system, her communication codes had been blocked by Galactic Authority. She was completely cut off from the outside world. A soft chime indicated that Min-Su had sent him the requested files. Tae-Ho spent the next several hours reading everything he could find about the Galactic Tribunal. What he learned made his heart sink even further. The Tribunal was ancient, established thousands of years before humans had even developed space flight. It was made up of 5 judges, each representing one of the founding species of the galactic community. The Althari judged based on logic and evidence. The Nethin focused on emotional truth and intent. The Corvin valued strength and honor above all else. The Solani worshipped tradition and precedent. And the Vorthak, the most mysterious of all, judged by methods that no other species fully understood. The legal procedures were incredibly complex, filled with rituals and traditions that had meaning for the alien species, but would be completely foreign to a human. Most cases took months or even years to resolve, with teams of trained advocates arguing over every detail. According to the records, no human had ever appeared before the tribunal as anything other than a defendant. There were no human lawyers who understood galactic law, no precedents to follow, no guidelines for how to proceed. Tae-Ho was going to have to learn everything in 5 days and then face the most powerful court in the galaxy alone. He leaned back in his chair and looked out the small window at the stars rushing past. Somewhere out there, his mother was sitting in a prison cell, probably scared and alone, waiting for a trial that could end with her losing everything she was. But she wouldn't be alone for long. Tae-Ho had never backed down from a challenge, and he wasn't about to start now. He would learn their laws, master their procedures, and find a way to prove his mother's innocence. The new soul raced through the darkness toward Nexus Prime, carrying a young captain who had no idea that he was about to change the course of galactic history. The new soul had been traveling through hyperspace for 2 days when Lieutenant Park Min-Su made a discovery that changed everything. Tae-Ho was in his quarters, surrounded by data tablets and holographic displays showing galactic legal codes, when Min-Su knocked on his door. "Captain, you need to see this," Min-Su said, his voice tight with excitement. He held a small data crystal that glowed with a soft blue light. "What is it?" Tae-Ho asked, looking up from a particularly confusing section about tribunal evidence. "Procedures. I managed to access your mother's personal research files before the Galactic Authority could seal them completely. This crystal contains her private logs from the last 6 months on New Busan." Min-Su placed the crystal on Tai-Ho's desk. "Captain, I think we've been told a very different story from what really happened." Tai-Ho inserted the crystal into his computer system. His mother's voice filled the room, tired but determined. "The first entry was dated 6 months ago. Research log, Day 1. I've arrived on New Busan to investigate reports of a strange illness affecting the Valari settlement in the Northern Valley. The local Valari leader, Dr. Nam Hyun Woo, contacted the colonial authorities asking for medical help. Their people are dying, and they don't know why. Tae-ho frowned. This wasn't what the tribunal had told him. According to Magistrate Kelthara, his mother had been conducting illegal experiments. But this log made it sound like she was trying to help the Valari, not harm them. The logs continued over the following days and weeks. Sora described meeting with Dr. Hyunwoo and other Valari medical professionals. They showed her their sick people, individuals who were slowly losing their ability to speak, move, and eventually breathe. The Valari called it the silent death. Day 15. The illness is unlike anything I've seen before. It attacks the nervous system in a very specific way, almost as if it was designed to target Valari biology. I've requested samples from the Galactic Health Organization, but they say this type of disease is unknown in their databases. As the logs progressed, Tae-ho learned more about his mother's investigation. She discovered that the silent death had appeared suddenly with no natural cause. Entire Valari families were dying within weeks of showing the first symptoms. The disease didn't affect humans or any other species in the area, only the Valari. Day 42. I've made a terrible discovery. The genetic markers in this disease show clear signs of artificial creation. Someone made this illness specifically to kill Valari people. Dr. Hyunwoo and I have been working day and night to understand how it works, but we're running out of time. More Valari die every day. Min-soo had been quietly listening to the logs alongside Tae-ho. Captain, your mother wasn't experimenting on the Valari. She was trying to save them from a plague that someone else created. The logs revealed more shocking details over the following entries. Sora had discovered communications intercepts suggesting that a species called the Drachmori were behind the artificial plague. The Drachmori wanted the Valari to abandon their colony world because it contained valuable mining resources. Day 67. The Drachmori think they're being clever. They created a disease that would wipe out the Valari colony without leaving. Obvious evidence of murder. If I can prove this, it will be one of the biggest war crimes in galactic history. But first, I need to find a cure. Tae-ho's hands clenched into fists as he listened to his mother's voice grow more desperate with each entry. She had been working 18-hour days, barely sleeping, trying to develop a treatment for the dying Valari. Day 83. I think I've found the answer. The disease attacks Valari DNA in a very specific way, but I can create a genetic bridge using human DNA as a template. My own genetic material might be compatible enough to create antibodies. It's risky, and I'll have to test it on myself first. The next several logs detailed Sora's dangerous experiments on herself. She had injected herself with modified versions of the Valari plague, testing different treatments until she found one that worked. Only after proving the treatment was safe on her own body did she begin working with Valari volunteers. Day 96. Success. Dr. Hyunwoo and 12 other Valari have agreed to participate in the treatment program. We're using medical isolation chambers to prevent the spread of infection while their bodies learn to fight the disease. The process is painful, but it's working. We're saving lives. Min-soo paused the log playback. Captain, those isolation chambers must be what the tribunal is calling containment units, and the painful treatment process is what they're calling torture. Tae-ho nodded grimly. Keep playing. I need to hear everything. The final logs were the most revealing. Sora had successfully cured over 50 Valari patients, but she had also discovered something that put her in extreme danger. Day 118. I've intercepted more Drachmori communications. They know I've found a cure, and they're panicking. If the galactic community learns that the Drachmori created a biological weapon to commit genocide, it will destroy them politically and economically. They're planning to frame me for illegal experiments to discredit my research. The last entry was recorded just 3 days before Sora's arrest. Day 125. Dr. Hyun-woo warned me that Drakmori agents are on their way to New Busan. I've hidden copies of all my research and evidence of the Drakmori conspiracy. If something happens to me, I hope someone will find the truth and finish what I started. The Valari people deserve justice, and the galaxy needs to know what the Drakmori have done. The recording ended, leaving Tae-ho and Min-soo sitting in stunned silence. Everything the Galactic Tribunal had told them was a lie. Sora wasn't a criminal. She was a hero who had risked her life to save an entire species from genocide. Min-soo, do we have any way to contact Dr. Hyun-woo? Tae-ho asked. I can try, but if the Drakmori are really behind this, they've probably made sure all the key witnesses are silenced or hidden. Tae-ho stood up and began pacing around his small quarters. His mind was racing with the implications of what they had learned. The tribunal judges think they're trying a human criminal, but what they're really doing is helping cover up an act of genocide. What are we going to do, Captain? Even with these logs, how can we prove the Drakmori conspiracy? They've had months to destroy evidence and prepare their case against your mother. Tae-ho stopped pacing and looked at his friend. We're going to do exactly what my mother would do. We're going to find the truth and make sure it comes to light, no matter what it costs us. He returned to his desk and began studying the Galactic legal codes with new purpose. Now, he wasn't just trying to defend his mother from criminal charges. He was preparing to expose one of the biggest conspiracies in galactic history. Min-soo, I need you to analyze these communications intercepts that my mother mentions. See if you can trace their origins or find any other evidence of Drakmori involvement. Also, keep trying to contact Dr. Hyun-woo. If he's still alive and free, he might be our only witness. What about you, Captain? I'm going to learn everything I can about the 5 species that sit on the tribunal. If I'm going to convince them that they've been lied to, I need to understand how each of them thinks and what kind of evidence they'll find convincing. As Min-soo left to begin his research, Tae-ho pulled up detailed files on the tribunal judges. The Althari valued logic and concrete proof. The Nethan cared about emotional truth and moral justice. The Corvan respected strength and courage in the face of adversity. The Silani honored ancient traditions and legal precedents. And then there were the Vorthak, the mysterious 5th species. Very little was known about how they made decisions or what they considered important. Some scholars thought they judged based on hidden patterns that other species couldn't detect. Others believed they could somehow sense the true intentions of those who appeared before them. Tae-ho realized that winning this case would require more than just presenting evidence. He would need to appeal to each species in a way that matched their values and beliefs. He would need to become not just a lawyer, but a diplomat who could bridge the gap between different ways of thinking. The new soul continued its journey through hyperspace, carrying a young captain who now knew that the fate of his mother, the Valari species, and possibly the entire galactic justice system rested in his hands. The tribunal station at Nexus Prime was unlike anything Tae-ho had ever seen. The massive structure hung in space like a giant crystal, its surfaces reflecting the light of 3 different stars. It was older than human civilization, built by the 5 founding species of the galactic community thousands of years ago. As the new soul approached the docking bay, Tae-ho could see hundreds of other ships from dozens of different species. Representatives from across the galaxy had come to witness the first major trial involving a human defendant. Captain, we're being guided to docking port 7, Min-soo reported from the bridge. And, sir, I have some news. I managed to make contact with Dr. Nam Hyun-woo. He's alive and he wants to help, but he says Drakmori agents are watching him closely. Tae-ho nodded grimly. Did he say anything else? He said to look for him in the public galleries during the trial. He'll find a way to get information to us if he can. The docking process was handled by automated systems, and within an hour, Tae-ho found himself walking through corridors that had witnessed thousands of years. of galactic justice. The walls were covered with inscriptions in dozens of different languages, recording famous cases and important legal decisions. Two security guards, tall reptilian beings with golden scales, escorted Tae-ho to the detention level where his mother was being held. When he saw her through the energy barrier of her cell, his heart nearly broke. Dr. Kim So-ra looked small and fragile in the harsh light of the prison. Her usually neat black hair was messy, and her clothes were the plain gray uniform given to all prisoners. But when she saw her son, her eyes filled with relief and love. "Tae-ho," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have come. This is too dangerous." "I'm going to get you out of here, Mother," Tae-ho replied, placing his hand against the energy barrier. "I know what really happened on New Busan. I found your research logs." So-ra's eyes widened. "Then you know about the Drak-Mori and what they did to the Valari people?" "I know everything, and I'm going to make sure the Tribunal knows too." Before they could say more, the security guards informed Tae-ho that visiting time was over. The trial would begin in 2 hours, and he needed to prepare. The main courtroom of the tribunal was vast and intimidating. 5 raised platforms held the judges, each designed to accommodate the specific needs of their species. The Althari judge sat behind a desk covered with holographic displays showing data and evidence. The Nethan judge was surrounded by flowing water and soft lights that reflected their emotional state. The Corvin judge's platform was made of black stone and metal, projecting strength and authority. The Solani judge sat among ancient books and scrolls, symbols of tradition and precedent. The 5th platform, belonging to the Vorthak judge, was the most mysterious. It was partly hidden in shadows, and strange symbols glowed faintly around its edges. The Vorthak themselves were rarely seen by other species, and even now their judge was just a vague shape in the darkness. Tae-ho took his place at the defense table, feeling very alone in the enormous room. The prosecution table was occupied by Veltar, a massive Corvin with dark red scales and fierce yellow eyes. Veltar was famous throughout the galaxy for never losing a case. The public galleries were filled with representatives from dozens of species, all watching to see how humanity would fare in their first major trial before the tribunal. Tae-ho scanned the crowd and spotted Dr. Yun-woo sitting in the back, trying to look inconspicuous. The trial began when the Althari judge, Magistrate Kelthara, called the court to order. Her voice echoed through the chamber as she read the charges against So-ra. "Dr. Kim So-ra, you are accused of unauthorized genetic manipulation of a sentient species, violation of the Universal Biological Preservation Act, and crimes against galactic harmony. How do you plead?" So-ra stood up in her energy cage, her voice clear and strong despite her circumstances. "I plead not guilty to all charges." Veltar rose from his seat, his massive form casting a long shadow across the courtroom. "Honored judges, I will prove that the defendant is guilty of the most serious crimes possible under galactic law. She captured innocent Valari citizens and subjected them to painful and illegal genetic experiments. The prosecutor activated a holographic display that showed video footage from So-ra's laboratory on New Busan. The images were damning. Valari individuals lying in what appeared to be containment chambers, medical equipment surrounding them, and So-ra herself working with genetic samples. "As you can see," Veltar continued, "the defendant was clearly conducting experiments on living Valari subjects. She took genetic material from multiple individuals without their consent and subjected them to procedures that caused obvious distress." The next piece of evidence was testimony from several Valari witnesses who described their time in So-ra's laboratory. They spoke of pain, fear, and confusion as the human doctor performed various procedures on them. "The defendant claims she was trying to help these people," Veltar said with contempt. "But her actions speak for themselves. She treated sentient beings like laboratory animals, caring nothing for their suffering as long as she could advance her research." The prosecutor's final argument was devastating. Humans are a young species, barely 15 years in the galactic community. They are impulsive, aggressive, and dangerous. This case proves that they cannot be trusted with the welfare of other species. I ask the tribunal to find Dr. Kim Sora guilty and to consider whether humanity deserves to remain part of our civilization. When Veltar finished, the courtroom was silent, except for the soft humming of the environmental systems. Tae-ho could feel the weight of thousands of eyes upon him as he stood to face the 5 judges. "Honored judges," he began, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "Everything you have just heard is based on lies and deception. My mother is not a criminal. She is a hero who risked her life to save an entire species from genocide." The Corvan judge, a fierce-looking being with scars across his face, leaned forward. "Those are serious accusations, human. Do you have evidence to support such claims?" "I do, Your Honor. But first, I request 1 day to prepare my full defense. The evidence I need to present is complex and will require careful explanation." The judges conferred among themselves in their various languages. Tae-ho watched anxiously as they debated his request. Finally, the mysterious Vorthak judge spoke for the first time, their voice like whispers in the darkness. "The human's request is reasonable. We will grant 1 standard day for preparation." The other judges seemed surprised by the Vorthak's intervention, but they agreed to the delay. As the court was adjourned, Tae-ho caught sight of Dr. Hyun-woo again. The Valari doctor made a subtle gesture toward a side corridor, indicating he wanted to meet. That evening, in a small maintenance area away from the main corridors, Tae-ho finally met the key witness his mother had mentioned in her logs. Dr. Hyun-woo was tall and thin like all Valari, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that reflected deep intelligence and sadness. "Captain Lee," he said in accented but clear English, "your mother saved my life and the lives of my entire family. I cannot let her be punished for her kindness. Can you testify tomorrow? Can you tell the judges what really happened? It will be dangerous. The Drakmori have agents everywhere, and they will try to stop me. But yes, I will testify. Your mother deserves nothing less." Hyun-woo handed Tae-ho a small data crystal. "This contains communications we intercepted from the Drakmori. Conspiracy. It proves they created the plague and framed your mother. Use it wisely." As they parted ways, Tae-ho felt a mixture of hope and fear. Tomorrow, he would have to stand before the most powerful court in the galaxy and prove that everything they believed was wrong. He would have to convince 5 ancient alien species that a young human woman was innocent of terrible crimes. But for the first time since this nightmare began, he had real evidence and a witness who could tell the truth. Tomorrow would determine not just his mother's fate, but the future of humanity's place in the galactic community. Tae-ho spent most of the night preparing for the most important day of his life. In his small quarters aboard the New Soul, he reviewed every piece of evidence, every legal precedent, and every cultural detail about the 5 species that would judge his mother. At dawn, he received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Nam Hyun-woo appeared at his door, but he was not alone. 3 other Valari stood with him, all wearing the simple clothes of medical workers. "Captain Lee," Hyun-woo said quietly, "I brought others who were in your mother's laboratory. They want to testify about what really happened." The other Valari introduced themselves as Dr. Park Soo-jin, a young female who had been one of the first patients treated, Dr. Kim Jae-wook, an elderly male who had lost his entire family to the silent death, and Lee Dae-som, a nurse who had worked alongside So-ra during the most dangerous days of the plague. "We know the risks," Da-som said, her large dark eyes filled with determination. "But we cannot let Dr. So-ra suffer for saving our people." Tae-ho felt a surge of gratitude and hope. "Thank you all, but I have to warn you, the prosecutor will try to make your testimony sound like you were victims who don't understand what happened to you." Let him try, Jae-wook said firmly. I am 140 years old. I have seen many things in my life, but I have never seen courage like your mother's. When the court session began that morning, the atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Word had spread throughout the station that the human defender had new evidence, and the galleries were packed with observers from across the galaxy. Tae-ho stood before the 5 judges, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. Honored judges, yesterday you heard accusations against my mother. Today I will show you the truth. He activated his holographic display, showing the same laboratory footage that Veltar had presented the day before. But this time, Tae-ho provided context. What you see here are not torture chambers, but medical isolation units designed to prevent the spread of a deadly plague. The Valari people you see are not prisoners, but volunteers who agreed to participate in experimental treatment to save their lives. The Althari judge, Kelthara, leaned forward with interest. You claim this was medical treatment. Present your evidence. Tae-ho inserted the data crystal that Hyun-woo had given him. The holographic display filled with intercepted communications between Drak-Mori agents discussing their plan to eliminate the Valari colony by creating an artificial plague. 6 months ago, Tae-ho explained, the Drak-Mori Empire decided they wanted the mineral resources on the Valari colony world. Instead of negotiating or declaring war openly, they chose to commit genocide through biological warfare. The communication intercepts were damning. Drak-Mori officials discussed the creation of the Silent Death, a disease engineered specifically to target Valari DNA. They talked about timing the release to make it look natural and about their plans to move in and claim the abandoned world once all the Valari were dead. When my mother discovered this plague, she had a choice, Tae-ho continued. She could report it to the authorities and watch thousands of Valari die while bureaucrats debated what to do. Or she could risk everything to find a cure herself. The Nethan judge, whose platform glowed with soft blue light that reflected emotional truth, spoke for the first time. The emotional resonance of these communications suggests they are genuine. But how do we know your mother's actions were truly beneficial? I call my first witness, Tae-ho announced. Dr. Nam Hyun-woo. The tall Valari doctor walked to the witness stand with dignity, despite the obvious fear in his eyes. Several beings in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, and Tae-ho noticed a group of Drak-Mori representatives whispering urgently among themselves. Dr. Hyun-woo, Tae-ho began. Please tell the court about your first meeting with my mother. Hyun-woo's voice was clear and strong as he described the desperate situation on New Busan. The Silent Death had already killed over 200 Valari, including his own parents and youngest brother. Traditional Valari medicine was powerless against the artificial disease. Dr. Sora arrived like an answer to our prayers, Hyun-woo said. But she did not come as a conqueror or an experimenter. She came as a healer who saw our suffering and decided to help. The Valari doctor explained how Sora had worked alongside him and other Valari medical professionals, sharing her knowledge and learning from their expertise. She had tested every potential treatment on herself first, risking her own life before asking any Valari to participate. The isolation chambers that the prosecutor calls containment units were actually our idea, Hyun-woo continued. We knew that the experimental treatment might cause temporary symptoms that could spread to others. Dr. Sora wanted to treat patients in the open, but we insisted on isolation for everyone's safety. Veltar rose to cross-examine the witness. Dr. Hyun-woo, is it not true that you were delirious with fever during much of this time? How can you be certain of what really happened? I was sick, yes, Hyun-woo replied calmly, but I was not unconscious. I remember every moment of Dr. Sora's treatment. She held my hand when I was afraid. She explained every procedure before performing it. She wept when she thought the treatment might not work. The prosecutor tried several more approaches, but Hyun-woo's testimony remained consistent and compelling. When Veltar finally gave up, Tae-ho called his next witness, Dr. Park Soo-jin was young even by Valari standards, barely past her species, equivalent of adulthood. She had been one of the sickest patients, nearly dead when Sora began her treatment. "I was the first volunteer," she said in a voice that carried throughout the silent courtroom. "My family was already dead, and I was dying too." Dr. Sora asked if I would try her experimental cure, and I agreed because I had nothing left to lose. Soo-jin described the treatment process in detail. It was painful and frightening, but Sora stayed with her patients around the clock, monitoring their progress and adjusting the treatment as needed. "She gave me back my life," Soo-jin said simply. "Not just because she cured the disease, but because she treated me like I mattered, like my life had value." The third witness, Dr. Kim Jae-wook, provided a different perspective. As an elder of the Valari community, he had initially been suspicious of the human doctor's motives. "I thought she might be using our desperation to exploit us," he admitted. "But when I saw her inject herself with the same experimental treatment she wanted to give us, I knew her intentions were pure." Jae-wook explained how Sora had spent days in isolation, suffering from the effects of the experimental virus and cure before she would even consider using it on Valari patients. "She risked her life for people she had never met before," the elderly Valari said. "In our culture, such selflessness is the highest virtue possible." The final witness, Lee Da-som, had worked most closely with Sora during the treatment program. As a nurse, she had seen the human doctor's methods up close. "Dr. Sora never performed any procedure without explaining it first and getting consent," Da-som testified. "Every Valari who participated in the treatment program was a volunteer who understood the risks." Da-som also testified about Sora's research methods. Instead of experimenting on Valari subjects, the human doctor had used computer models and cell cultures to test most of her theories. The actual treatments were based on solid scientific principles, not random experimentation. When the last witness finished testifying, the courtroom was completely silent. The evidence was overwhelming. Sora had not committed crimes against the Valari people. She had saved them from genocide. But Tae-ho knew that proving his mother's innocence was only half the battle. He still needed to convince the judges that the real criminals were the Drachmori, and that this case represented something larger than one human doctor's actions. "Honored judges," he said, "the evidence is clear. My mother is not guilty of the crimes she has been charged with. But more than that, this entire case is part of a conspiracy to cover up one of the most serious war crimes in galactic history." The Corvin judge, scarred and intimidating, fixed Tae-ho with a fierce stare. "You accuse an entire species of conspiracy. These are dangerous words, human. I accuse specific individuals within the Drachmori Empire of genocide and of manipulating this tribunal to avoid justice," Tae-ho replied without flinching. "And I can prove it." As he prepared to present his final evidence, Tae-ho noticed movement in the gallery. Several Drachmori representatives were quietly leaving the courtroom, their faces dark with anger and fear. The real battle was just beginning. The courtroom fell into complete silence as Tae-ho prepared to present his most dangerous evidence. He could see the Drachmori representatives in the gallery shifting nervously, and several had already left the room entirely. "Honored judges," Tae-ho began. "What I am about to show you will prove that this entire case is built on lies designed to cover up genocide." He activated his holographic display once more, this time showing a detailed analysis of the intercepted Drachmori communications. The evidence was overwhelming. Recorded conversations between high-ranking Drachmori officials discussing the creation of the Silent Death, timeline documents showing when the plague was released, and financial records proving that Drachmori mining corporations had already made plans to claim Valari territory. The Althari judge, Kelthara, studied the data with her usual cold precision. "These communications appear authentic, but how do we know they have not been fabricated?" "Because they match perfectly with the genetic evidence from the plague itself," Tae-ho replied. He brought up detailed scientific analysis that his mother had completed during her research. Dr. Sora discovered that the silent death was not a natural disease. It was engineered specifically to target Valari DNA while leaving all other species unharmed. The scientific evidence was complex, but Tae-ho had spent hours learning how to explain it in terms that each species would understand. For the logical Althari, he presented statistical analysis and genetic markers. For the emotional Nethan, he showed the devastating impact on Valari families and communities. The Drakmori created this plague to commit genocide, Tae-ho continued, but they needed a way to cover their tracks. When my mother discovered their crime and found a cure, they couldn't let her expose them. So they framed her for the very crimes they had committed. Veltar, the Corvan prosecutor, rose to his feet with obvious anger. These are serious accusations against a founding member of the Galactic community. The Drakmori Empire has been part of this tribunal for over 2,000 years, and that long history makes their crimes even more serious, Tae-ho replied firmly. They use their position and reputation to manipulate the justice system and cover up genocide. The Solani judge, surrounded by ancient books and scrolls, spoke in a voice heavy with tradition. Young human, you ask us to overturn thousands of years of legal precedent based on your interpretation of evidence. This was the moment Tae-ho had prepared for most carefully. He knew that each species on the tribunal valued different things, and he would need to appeal to all of them to win his mother's freedom. Honored Solani judge, Tae-ho said with deep respect, I am not asking you to abandon your traditions. I am asking you to uphold them. The oldest law in your legal code states that the strong must protect the weak and that justice must be blind to political power. He turned to address each judge individually, using everything he had learned about their cultures and values. To the wise Althari, I present logic and evidence that cannot be denied. The scientific proof shows beyond any doubt that my mother saved lives rather than taking them. To the noble Nethin, I appeal to your sense of emotional truth. You can feel the sincerity in the testimony of the Valari witnesses who owe their lives to my mother's courage. To the mighty Corvan, I show you true strength. My mother faced impossible odds to save people who were not even her own species. She risked everything because it was the right thing to do. To the honored Solani, I invoke the ancient precedent of the Sanctuary Wars, when this very tribunal was founded to protect small species from larger ones who would destroy them for profit. Finally, Tae-ho turned to face the mysterious Vorthak judge, whose platform remained shrouded in shadows and strange symbols. And to the wise Vorthak, I offer something that your species values above all others. The truth, no matter how difficult or dangerous it might be to acknowledge. The Vorthak judge stirred in the shadows, and for the first time in the trial, they spoke at length. Human child, the Vorthak said in a voice like whispers in the wind. Your species is young and often foolish, but sometimes the young see truths that the old have chosen to ignore. Tell us, what do you believe this case is really about? Tae-ho took a deep breath. This was his moment to speak not just as a son defending his mother, but as a representative of humanity addressing the most powerful court in the galaxy. This case is about more than one human doctor or even one act of genocide, he said. It's about what kind of civilization we want to be. Do we want a galaxy where the strong can destroy the weak without consequence? Do we want a justice system that can be manipulated by political influence? Or do we want a community where species help each other and where truth matters more than power? The courtroom was completely silent as Tae-ho continued. My mother could have ignored the Valari plague. It wasn't her responsibility, and helping them put her at great risk, but she saw people dying and chose to act because that's what decent beings do for each other. The Drakmori made a different choice. They saw people they wanted to eliminate, and they chose genocide. When that crime was discovered, they chose to lie and manipulate rather than face justice. Tae-ho gestured toward the evidence displays still glowing around the courtroom. Everything you need to know about this case is right here. The communications, proving the Drakmori conspiracy, the scientific evidence showing the artificial nature of the plague, the testimony of the Valari people who were saved by my mother's courage. But most importantly, you have a choice to make. You can follow the easy path and convict my mother based on lies and political pressure. Or you can follow the difficult path and acknowledge that one of the founding species of this tribunal has committed genocide. Veltar jumped to his feet. The human is trying to turn this trial into a political statement. The evidence against Dr. Sora is clear, regardless of these conspiracy theories about the Drakmori. The evidence is clear, Tae-ho agreed, but not in the way the prosecutor claims. Every piece of legitimate evidence supports my mother's innocence and exposes the Drakmori conspiracy. He turned back to face the 5 judges. I know that what I'm asking is difficult. The Drakmori have been part of this tribunal for thousands of years. Admitting that they committed genocide will shake the foundations of galactic politics, but the alternative is worse. If you convict my mother for saving lives while ignoring the real criminals who tried to destroy an entire species, then you will be sending a message to every being in the galaxy. You will be saying that political power matters more than justice, and that genocide is acceptable as long as it's covered up properly. The judges conferred among themselves in their various languages. Tae-ho watched anxiously as they debated, knowing that his mother's life and humanity's future in the galactic community hung in the balance. Finally, the Vorthak judge spoke again. Captain Lee Tae-ho of the human species, you have presented evidence and arguments that require careful consideration. This tribunal will recess for 1 day to deliberate on all that we have heard. As the judges filed out of the courtroom, Tae-ho felt a mixture of exhaustion and hope. He had presented the best case possible, but now everything depended on whether 5 ancient alien species would choose justice over political convenience. Dr. Hyun-woo approached him as the courtroom began to empty. You spoke well, Captain. Your mother would be proud. I hope it was enough, Tae-ho replied, watching through the large windows as the stars turned slowly around the ancient station. Tomorrow, he would learn whether words could truly change the course of galactic justice. The final day of the trial arrived with unusual activity throughout the tribunal station. Word had spread across the galaxy that the judges were about to render a decision that could change interstellar law forever. Representatives from hundreds of species had arrived to witness the outcome. Tae-ho had barely slept during the night of deliberation. He spent most of the dark hours walking the observation decks of the new Sol, staring out at the stars and thinking about his mother. Whatever happened today would determine not just her fate, but the future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galactic community. When the court session began, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The 5 judges took their positions on their elevated platforms, their expressions unreadable. In the detention area, Sora stood quietly in her energy cage, her eyes fixed on her son with a mixture of pride and worry. The gallery was packed beyond capacity. Tae-ho could see Dr. Hyun-woo and the other Valari witnesses sitting together, their blue faces tense with anxiety. The Drakmori representatives had returned, but they looked nervous and kept whispering urgently among themselves. Magistrate Kelthara of the Althari called the court to order, her voice echoing through the vast chamber. This tribunal has deliberated on the case of Dr. Kim Sora and the charges brought against her. We have also considered the additional evidence presented regarding the origins of the Valari plague known as the Silent Death. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Tae-ho felt his heart pounding as he waited for the verdict that would determine everything. After careful analysis of all evidence and testimony, Kelthara continued, we find the scientific proof overwhelming. The Silent Death was indeed an artificially created biological weapon designed specifically to target Valari DNA. A murmur ran through the gallery. The Drakmori representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Nethan judge spoke next, their platform glowing with soft colors that reflected deep emotion. The testimony of the Valari witnesses carries the unmistakable resonance of truth. Dr. Kim Sora acted not as a predator, but as a healer driven by compassion for suffering beings. The scarred Corvin judge's voice boomed through the chamber. We find that Dr. Kim Sora displayed the highest form of courage by risking her life to save members of another species. Her actions honor the warrior code that values the protection of the innocent above personal safety. The ancient Selani judge rustled through scrolls and books before speaking. The legal precedents are clear. The Universal Biological Preservation Act contains specific exceptions for medical interventions designed to save lives. Dr. Kim So-ra's actions fall clearly within these exceptions. Finally, all eyes turned to the mysterious Vorthak judge. Their shadowy platform pulsed with strange lights as they prepared to speak. This case has revealed truths that go far beyond the guilt or innocence of one individual, the Vorthak said, in their whisper-like voice. We have discovered evidence of genocide, conspiracy, and the manipulation of justice itself. The Vorthak judge paused, and the silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. But we have also discovered something else. We have seen what happens when a being chooses compassion over convenience, when someone risks everything to help others, regardless of species or personal cost. Tae-ho felt tears forming in his eyes as he realized what was happening. Therefore, the Vorthak continued, this tribunal renders the following judgment. Dr. Kim So-ra is found innocent of all charges. She is hereby released, and all restrictions on her movements are lifted. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. So-ra collapsed to her knees as the energy cage around her dissolved, tears streaming down her face. Tae-ho rushed forward, to embrace his mother for the first time in months. But the Vorthak judge was not finished speaking. They waited for the noise to die down before continuing. Furthermore, this tribunal establishes a new legal precedent, which shall be known as the Soul Precedent in honor of Captain Lee Tae-ho's ship and his courageous defense of justice. The chamber fell silent again as everyone waited to hear what this new precedent would mean. From this day forward, the Vorthak announced, any being who acts to preserve life and prevent genocide shall be protected under galactic law, even if their actions technically violate existing regulations. The preservation of life takes precedence over bureaucratic procedures. Additionally, this tribunal finds that members of the Drakmori Empire did indeed create and deploy a biological weapon designed to commit genocide against the Valari people. Arrest warrants are hereby issued for all individuals involved in this conspiracy. The Drakmori representatives in the gallery began shouting protests, but security forces were already moving to detain them. Several tried to flee but were quickly surrounded. The Althari judge, Kelthara, added the final element of the judgment. The Drakmori Empire is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council, pending a full investigation into their actions. Their voting rights and privileges are suspended indefinitely. As the formal proceedings concluded, Tae-ho stood with his arm around his mother's shoulders, both of them overwhelmed by what had just happened. They had not only won her freedom, but had exposed a conspiracy and established a new principle of galactic law. Dr. Hyun-woo and the other Valari witnesses approached them, their faces shining with joy and gratitude. Dr. So-ra, Hyun-woo said formally, on behalf of all Valari people, I thank you for saving our lives and our species. And Captain Lee, added Dr. Park Soo-jin, your words today will be remembered for generations. You have shown that justice can triumph over power when someone has the courage to speak the truth. In the days that followed, the impact of the Soul Precedent spread throughout the galaxy. The case became required study in law schools across hundreds of worlds. Young beings of many species were inspired by the story of the human captain who faced the most powerful court in the galaxy alone and changed the course of justice. The Drakmori conspiracy trials that followed revealed the full extent of their crimes. Dozens of officials were convicted and sentenced to prison terms. The biological weapons they had created were destroyed, and strict new laws were passed to prevent similar atrocities. Dr. Kim So-ra returned to her research, but now she worked with the full support of the galactic medical community. Her techniques for treating artificial plagues became standard practice throughout known space, and she was honored with the galaxy's highest award for service to interspecies peace. Tae-ho found that his life had changed as well. Requests poured in from beings across the galaxy asking him to represent them in legal matters. He eventually left his military career to become the galaxy's first human advocate specializing in interspecies law. But perhaps the most important change was in how different species viewed each other. The sole precedent established the principle that all beings had a duty to help each other, regardless of their planet of origin or physical differences. 6 months after the trial, Tae-ho received a communication that made him smile. It was from a young Althari lawyer who was about to represent her first client before a regional tribunal. She was nervous and asked for advice on how to present her case. As Tae-ho composed his reply, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. He had started as a military captain trying to save his mother from false charges. He had ended up as someone who helped establish new principles of justice that would protect beings throughout the galaxy. The most important thing to remember, he wrote to the young Althari, is that the law exists.